Psalm chapter 1 and the first 3 verses. Verses 1 to 3. Blessed is the one who does not walk in step with the wicked, or stand in the way that sinners take, or sit in the company of mockers, but whose delight is in the law of the Lord, and who meditates on his law day and night. That person is like a tree planted by streams of water, which yields its fruit in season, and whose leaf does not wither. Whatever they do prospers. So I'm going to see if people want to do a bit of an exercise this morning. Is kind of a thought exercise. So think about your favorite vacation that you've had. And think back in your memories to a really good time. And maybe it doesn't have to be a vacation, just a really good event that you maybe had. And, again, it could be the beach, could be a cruise, could be just a gathering with friends, a birthday party, maybe Christmas time for some people, not me. Anything that would be your best vacation, something that was really, really fun. And really reflect on it. Think of the things that you were doing, the smells that you smelled, the things that were happening around you, the conversations that you had. And try to relive that moment in your mind. And after you've done that, think about how that makes you feel now. How do you feel after you've done that? Chances are you feel a little bit happier. If you're thinking about these happy memories, it's going to help you feel happy now. Reflecting back on those things and really focusing on that thing that happened affects your mood at this time right now. And this simple exercise shows that the things that we choose to think about can influence the way we think now and our mood that we feel now. The emotions that we feel right now can be influenced what we focus our mind on. If you choose to deliberately think about good things, in general, you're going to start to feel better. You're going to start to feel happier, and you're going to have more joy in your life if you deliberately focus on those things that make you happy. And again, it could be reflecting back on past memories that made you feel good. The same thing, unfortunately, can work in a negative sense. If you're choosing to focus on negative things, that person that cut you off in traffic, how slow the cashier's line was, and you're just constantly thinking about how bad things are for you, it's going to make you feel bad. Those negative emotions are going to be more fostered in yourself, in your mind. So what we choose to think about, what we choose to focus our minds on, can really affect our moods and the way that we feel at one time. And this thing that we did this morning, where you think back and you really try to relive something and really focus your mind on it, is a form of meditation. Now, it's kind of funny that word meditation has a lot of connotations that are associated with it in our culture. But in the Bible, we are told to meditate as well. If you noticed in our scripture reading in Psalm 1 and verse 2, it talks about the person who's blessed. So blessed is the one, and it talks about the negative things, who does not walk in step with the wicked and so forth. But then in verse 2, blessed is the one whose delight is in the law of the Lord, and who meditates on his law day and night. We are told to meditate in the scriptures. So what does that mean? Sometimes, again, we have that idea of what meditation might be in our society and our culture. But in the Bible, it tells us to meditate. So what exactly is this or this meditation that's being talked about? Why should we take time to meditate? And how should we meditate? What is this idea of meditation in the Bible? Because we are to do it. So what does that mean? How are we supposed to do it? And what are we supposed to think about? So to start, what is meditation? What is meditation in the Bible? We can start by what meditation is not. And again, there's a lot of ideas out there of what meditation is. And generally, what it means when you hear meditation in our culture today is emptying your mind. Just trying to think about nothing. Whenever I hear meditation, I think of what the Eastern religions might say, where, Om, and you're kind of just sitting there with your hands and little hoops with your fingers. And the objective in those things is to really experience truth or peace, kind of restarting your mind. Experiencing the center of consciousness within. It's a very center-focused thing, where you're just trying to empty your mind and try to feel yourself in that way, feel your own consciousness. It's actually practiced by some Christian mystics as well, and they meditate to experience God in the hope of receiving some sort of revelation from God during this time. Again, taking a quiet time where you're trying to empty your mind and let God speak to you in some way. We know from our study of the scriptures, God doesn't speak to us in that way necessarily, so a lot of the time what's happening there is you're actually just seeking your own thoughts, and what you think is coming from God is just something that you're thinking about yourself. But both of these ideas of meditation and this whole idea of kind of emptying your mind, not necessarily a bad thing to do that at times, to try to kind of calm yourself and take a quiet moment just to try to relax, that's fine. But for the purpose of trying to find some sort of truth within is a very subjective thing. If you're trying to find out some revelation from God from within yourself, that can be very difficult to do. We have the Holy Spirit that guides us. We do have that. But the meditation talked about in the Bible is a very defined thing that's an objective form of meditation, something that we can rely upon, I guess, rather than just trying to rely upon our own feelings and truths that we might experience during a quiet time where we're trying to empty our minds of thoughts. You go to 1 Timothy chapter 4. We're going to look at verse 15. And this will depend on the version, what phrase is used in this passage. Meditation in the Bible is to think about a truth or reality that's already revealed. So again, if you're trying to empty your mind and receive some sort of new revelation or truth, that's not what the meditation in the Bible is talking about. The meditation in the Bible is talking about reflecting and thinking about a truth or reality that's already given to us. In Psalm it says to meditate on the law of the Lord. So God has given us the law of the Lord, and that's what we are to meditate on. So 1 Timothy chapter 4, and we'll look at verse 15. I'm going to read the New King James Version. So this is where it might differ from yours. 1 Timothy chapter 4, verse 15. It says, "Meditate on these things. Give yourself entirely to them, that your progress may be evident to all." So that first phrase, meditate on these things. The New International Version, I know there's actually a couple of those, so yours might say, be diligent in these matters. So that's where that version translates meditate to be diligent in these matters. The New American Standard Version translates it in an interesting way. It says, take pains with these things. So really focus on what you're to be thinking about, the law of the Lord. So take pains with these things. Be diligent. Those are things that in the translations, those are kind of synonymous with meditate in that respect. And it shows that the meditation we are to undertake is a kind of searching and seriously thinking about a subject with the purpose of truly understanding it. So again, it's not emptying your mind and trying to receive some sort of new truth. It's focusing on a certain thing to try to understand it fully, trying to really understand what God is trying to tell us. Meditate on these things, be diligent in these matters, take pains with these things. This is all focusing on a subject matter and really trying to understand it to its fullest. Thinking deliberately about something so that you can better understand it. I recently had a test at school that was really challenging. It's a new field that I'm not really familiar with. It's actually bond trading, so like stock market stuff. And I really don't know anything about that. It's like derivatives and options and calls and puts and all this kind of stuff, right? All this jargon that I don't understand. And I'd write a midterm, and so I was taking pains. I was diligent. I was really trying to understand this material, and it was difficult. It was one of those things where I was diligently searching, trying to figure this stuff out, so I could write the midterm and hopefully be somewhat successful in it. I like in the bulletin article today, if you have that with you, that touches on this subject as well. And it defines a very interesting definition where there's a difference between Bible study and meditation. And the kind of line that separates those two things is where Bible study is gathering the facts and the knowledge. So, if you're reading your Bible every day, you do that and you learn things. You learn kind of facts and knowledge and realities. You learn the names, the places, what happened at certain times. And meditation is reflecting on how that knowledge affects our lives and how that helps us develop our relationship with God. So it's when I read that, and it really helped me to understand, and I saw a similarity with wisdom and knowledge. Wisdom is defined as the application of knowledge. So if you take that knowledge in the scriptures, you're doing that through Bible study, then you meditate on it. You really seriously, deliberately think about how that knowledge that you just learned applies to your life, how you can have a better relationship with God. That's the application of that knowledge, and that's you applying wisdom in that situation. You're going to develop wisdom in your life by doing that. It's really focusing deliberately on what God is telling us. taking pains with it, being diligent, really trying to understand what God is telling you. So it's that idea of really focusing on a certain thing and being deliberate about it. If you go back to Psalm, we're going to look at a couple of passages in Psalm. We're going to start at Psalm 77. And in these passages, we're going to see some subject matter that we can actually choose to think about. So kind of give us some ideas. When we meditate, we know that we are to focus on what God is telling us. What are we to focus on? What are some of these things that we can think about and really meditate about? Psalm 77 and verse 12 is what we're going to look at. So Psalm 77, verse 12. I will consider all your works, and I will meditate on all your mighty deeds. So we can think and really recognize what God has created and what he's done for us. Again, that's a pretty broad definition, all of your works. You can look at the creation. I know that's one thing that I like, spending time outside, and I like seeing those sorts of things. Spending a lot of time out in nature, and you can really appreciate the creation that's around you. And that's a form of meditation, seeing what God created, seeing the complexity, all the different types of animals and the types of things that are out there. I can also apply and kind of go beyond that and look at the blessings that he's given to us as well. I was thinking about that just this morning, is how the Lord's Supper, the communion, is a form of meditation that we are doing. We are taking this time to deliberately think about what Jesus has done for us, what God has done for us in giving us Jesus so that we can have that salvation. Take that time to think about these works that God has done for us, the blessings that he's provided to us. You go to Psalm 119. We're going to read the whole chapter. Just kidding, we're not. That's the longest chapter in the whole Bible. So Psalm 119, we're going to look at verse 15 first. I would recommend reading the whole chapter, but we're not going to do it today. Psalm 119, we'll look at verse 15. I meditate on your precepts and consider your ways. So here in this passage, it's showing how we meditate on God's precepts. So we can meditate on God's revealed word. Again, that's the thing that he's provided to us to give us his will, is the scriptures, the Bible that we have in front of us. We can meditate on these things. And again, we study it, we learn the facts and the things, the realities that are presented us in the scriptures, and then we meditate on that. We really think about how that applies to us and how it can be, how we can have that relationship with God through the things that he's teaching us. You get down to verse 97 to 99 of Psalm 119. So 97 to 99. It says, "Oh, how I love your law. I meditate on it all day long. Your commands are always with me and make me wiser than my enemies. I have more insight than all my teachers, for I meditate on your statutes." So again, I like in this passage where it again ties that idea of wisdom in with this. We can gain the facts and the knowledge. We like watching Jeopardy, and you can have these trivia, these little blips of knowledge and everything. And that's nice. It's nice to have that knowledge. And, I hear people saying, "Oh, you're so smart for being on Jeopardy." And I'm like, well, you have lots of knowledge for being on Jeopardy, but can you apply anything in real life? You may not be actually very smart. You just might have a lot of knowledge stuffed in your head, so you're doing really good at Jeopardy. Wisdom is the application of that knowledge. That's where you can see real intelligence in people, is how they apply the things that they've learned and how they've applied them effectively. And that's how, if we look at God's law, just as we see in this passage, and we look at his commands, and we make sure that those commands are always with us, it's going to make us wiser than our enemies. I'm not sure if we have any direct enemies in our lives, but we are going to be wise because of it. We're going to have wisdom if we see what God is teaching us, we think about it, we meditate on it in a purposeful manner, a deliberate manner, and that's going to develop that wisdom within us. So we can think about what is taught in Scripture, what God has given us. We go to Philippians chapter 4. This is a list that Paul has given us of things to meditate on as well. So Philippians 4 and verse 8 is what we're going to read. So Philippians 4, verse 8. It says, "Finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things." Again, depending on your version, that last phrase, think about such things, your version might say meditate on these things. Focus on these things. Make a deliberate effort. Sometimes we get into the trap of thinking that we can't control what we think about. And to an extent, that's true. Thoughts are going to pop into your head, and you're going to think about it momentarily. But we really have the choice of what to deliberately meditate on. We have the choice of what to really focus our minds on. And again, that's where if you start focusing on all those negative things, you're going to choose, you might think, again, those little things that kind of irk you, the lineup is long or somebody cuts you off. You can choose to focus on that. That first initial thought is going to pop in there, and it's your choice whether or not you focus on that and really let that get to you and really let that kind of ruin your day because of this negative thing that happened to you. So when you're doing that, you're meditating on negative things. You're really focusing on that. And we can get into a big downward spiral when we do that sort of stuff. But in this passage, we can see that we are to think about these things. It says, think about such things or meditate on these things. It's something that he's telling us to do. And if he's telling us to do it, we can do it. It's something that is possible for us to take our thought process and focus on positive things. So when those little thoughts pop into your head about something negative, make the choice to not really focus on that. Try to focus on something positive instead. Think about whatever is true, noble, just, pure, lovely, anything that's excellent or praiseworthy. Fill your mind with these positive things and make a deliberate effort to think about those things. And just like that little exercise we did in the beginning, it's going to help you feel better. Instead of your mood going down in that pit of kind of anger and negative feelings, when you think about those excellent and praiseworthy things, it's going to hopefully get you out of that place and give you a little bit more joy in that respect. So there's a very real difference between biblical meditation and that which is practiced in many other religions or what we think about in our society. Christian meditation dwells on what is already revealed in creation or inspired revelation in the scriptures. It's focusing on something that's objective and not subjective. If you're trying to get those thoughts from within, that's a subjective thing. But we're understanding and we're focusing our minds on things that are objective, something that God is giving us. So why is this important? Why is this something that we should be doing? If we go back to our scripture reading, Psalm 1, we'll look at that one again. So why do we do this? Why are we to meditate? God tells us that we should be doing it. We should be focusing our thoughts on these things. But why? What's the purpose of this? What's the point? Psalm 1, verses 1 to 3. Blessed is the one who does not walk in step with the wicked, or stand in the way that sinners take, or sit in the company of mockers, but whose delight is in the law of the Lord, and who meditates on his law day and night. That person is like a tree planted by streams of water, which yields its fruit in season, and whose leaf does not wither. Whatever they do prospers. This one gives us a bit more of the result. Again, it says, do not think about those negative things. Do not walk in step with the wicked or stand in the way that sinners take. Don't focus on those negative things. But instead, delight in the law of the Lord and meditate on those things. And as a result, we're going to be like a tree planted by streams of water. We're going to yield fruit in season, whose leaf does not wither. And we are going to prosper. So we're going to gain strength and we're going to gain blessings from thinking and meditating on the law of the Lord. When we focus on what we are to focus on and deliberately think about it, we are going to get a strength from this. We are going to get a joy and a peace from it. Again, back to that original example, if you're focusing on those positive things, your mood is going to change. You're going to feel better about it because you're focusing on positive things. And again, this is something that is going to take practice. It's going to be something that doesn't maybe come naturally at times because we do think that sometimes once those negative thoughts come in our mind, there's nothing we can do to kind of get ourselves off of it. But it is a possible thing with practice. And when we do it, we are going to be blessed because of it. We are going to gain strength and peace and joy from it. If you go to Romans 12, this is another reason why we should meditate as Christians. We're going to look at the first two verses. So Romans 12, verses 1 and 2. And this passage deals with how meditation is a very important part of our transformation to be more like Christ. So Romans 12, verses 1 to 2. Therefore I urge you, brothers and sisters, in view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God. This is your true and proper worship. Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will. So the goal of every Christian is to be more like Christ, to develop those Christ-like qualities. And this requires a transformation. When we dedicate ourselves to Christ and we're raised out of those waters in baptism, we're born a new creation. And part of that creation and part of that transformation starts right then. We have a whole life ahead of us to live and become more like Christ. And part of this, and this transformation is only possible by the renewing of your mind. Actions definitely go along with it, is putting these things into practice. But it goes hand in hand with the renewing of your mind as well. We have a choice of what to think about, and we are to focus on how to be more like Christ, to really think about those facts and those things that are presented to us in the scriptures and how they apply to us. To become a true disciple of Christ, we have to choose what to meditate on so that we do get that transformation. We do become more and more like Christ. We go to Colossians chapter 3. Look at verses 1 and 2. This renewing of the mind, this transformation, only works when we set our minds on the right things. Colossians 3, verses 1 and 2. Since then, you have been raised with Christ. Set your hearts on things above, where Christ is, seated at the right hand of God. Set your minds on things above and not on earthly things. So it's only when we set our minds on things above that we'll be successful in completing this transformation. And the only way to set our minds on things above is to have that time of meditation, studying the Bible, learning what he's teaching us out of the scriptures, and then really trying to see how that applies in our lives, gaining that wisdom from the scriptures, that the things that's being taught to us in the scriptures. If you go back to Romans, and we look at Romans chapter 8 and verses 5 to 8. Many Christians and many people fall because they meditate on the wrong things. We talked about how thinking about something deliberately is a choice. We do have thoughts that enter into our minds, but what we choose to really focus on, what we choose to really hone in on in our minds, is our choice. And this passage here, Romans 8, verses 5 to 8, contains a warning. It contains how if you focus on the wrong things, that's going to be your downfall. Romans 8, verses 5 to 8. Those who live according to the flesh have their minds set on what the flesh desires. But those who live in accordance with the Spirit have their minds set on what the Spirit desires. The mind governed by the flesh is death, but the mind governed by the Spirit is life and peace. The mind governed by the flesh is hostile to God. It does not submit to God's law, nor can it do so. Those who are in the realm of the flesh cannot please God. You cannot be pleasing to God if you focus and dwell on physical things. Again, in my version, it talks about the flesh, who live according to the flesh. What's being referred to there as the flesh is physical things, the world around you. This is where it's a very challenging thing to deliberately focus on the correct things, because we are surrounded by physical things. That's what we interact with every single day. And so this passage is very challenging because it's difficult to not think about those things because we're constantly bombarded with them all the time. So it does take some deliberate effort to meditate on the proper things and not meditate and focus your mind on all these negative physical things that are around us. We fill our minds with the influence that we want to become. We fill our minds with the influences that are around us. And there's a phrase out there that says, you are what you think. You become what you focus your mind on. That's where it's quite dangerous with the media that we have now. Our attachment to media that's developed over the last, 20 years or so. In this age of our constant attachment to media, we are susceptible in particular to filling our minds with the wrong things. Even with the algorithms, a lot of those things, if you spend time on social media or spend your time searching through things, it's monitoring exactly what you're focusing on. It develops a profile of you of what it thinks you want to see all the time for the purpose of likes. That's how they generate their revenue, these ad agencies and these social media sites. So if you spend time looking on things, it's going to give you more of that. So you spend more and more time on a certain subject, it's going to keep giving you more and more and more and more and more. So if you're focusing on a whole bunch of negative things all the time on your social media device or your device and looking at these things, it's going to keep giving you more and more of that. So it's going to start influencing you more than you realize. What we watch and what we fill our minds with does have an influence on our patterns and behaviors, the ways that we react in life. This repeated viewing and repeated verbalizing in our minds really shapes our future and how we might react in the future to certain things. One example I think of this, I might have used this example before, but it's true, and it still kind of continually kind of bugs me. I listen to the radio during work, like it's just kind of on in the background, kind of quietly, and it's just like Sonic is what I listen to is all day. It's just kind of playing in the background. So I catch myself singing lyrics sometimes, and I actually have to catch myself because sometimes there's some bad language, like there's profanity in these songs, and it pops into my head. And that's one way that's influencing me. It's just this quiet music playing all day. I don't really think I'm thinking about it that much. But then when I'm kind of just, not thinking about it too much and I start singing to myself, it influences me to say those things in my mind. I'm like, oh, that's no good. And that's one way that we can be influenced, and that works on so many different levels. We have to be careful with what we fill our minds with. The movies, the TV shows, the things that we look on our devices all day, these all have an influence on us, and it can all influence us to either a good way or a bad way. We fill our mind with positive spiritual thoughts, and when we do that, we're going to renew the mind. We're going to be transformed. And this passage in Romans 8 warns us that if we fill our minds on these physical things, these things that are around us, that can be our downfall. People who are focused on that solely cannot please God. So we have to have our minds focused on these pure and positive things so we can have that transforming of the mind so that we can be pleasing to God. So how do we do it? How do we meditate? What does this mean? Some of the mechanics of this is finding a quiet time and place. If you really want to focus on what is being taught, it's difficult to do that. Some people can do this, but it is difficult to do it if you're being distracted, by certain things. And if people are constantly interrupting you, or if you're distracted by noise and sounds around you. Again, back to my example at work, a lot of the work that I'm doing is, I've done it a bunch of times, so I don't really have to be super focused on it. So that's where I can have the radio on in the background. So it's kind of just reviewing things and looking at drawings and that. But if I'm studying for that test, all the sound's off, and I'm really focused. I'm nailed into whatever I'm trying to figure out. And it's the same thing with scriptures. If we're really trying to figure out what God is teaching us in the scriptures and we're truly meditating on it, it's better to be in a quiet place. Have a quiet time and a quiet place to do this. If you go to Genesis 24, we'll look at one example in the Old Testament where Isaac chose a place to meditate. Genesis 24, and we'll look at verse 63. So Genesis 24, verse 63. So this is Isaac. It says, he went out into the field one evening to meditate, and as he looked up, he saw camels approaching. So I chose this verse just to show that he went out into the field to meditate. He didn't stay in his camp, where there'd be a bunch of distractions. He went out into the quiet place all by himself, I guess with some camels around, but he went there and meditated. He thought about things. And that same thing works for us. Find a quiet place. And again, this is very personal. For me, I'm a morning person. I like getting up early and having the quiet time in the morning. So I tend to read the Bible and think about things at that period of time. For you, maybe it's after everybody goes to bed. Maybe you're more of a night owl and you do it then. Maybe it's something where you can do at lunch, at work, and you go off to a park somewhere where it's a little bit quieter. Things like that. Find a place that's quiet where you can really focus on what God is teaching you and can focus your thoughts on that one thing with no distractions. Another thing you can do is think of something of value. Again, this is what we looked at already. Focus your meditation on what God has created, his works, the blessings he's given to you. This is where I think, again, of the Lord's Supper being a very good example of it being quiet in here, and that's the purpose of it, is to really focus on the sacrifice that God has made and Jesus has made for us. It's quiet. It's a place that's dedicated for it. It's a time that we've chosen to do it. So it's very defined, and we can think about that in a purposeful way. So when you're doing your meditation on your own, focus on the creation, the blessings God's given you, the things that have been taught to you in Scripture. Maybe it's something that you've just learned and you want to think more about it and see how it applies in your life. We can look at the things that Paul told us in the Philippians, or Paul told to the Philippians. Those things that are true and noble, excellent and praiseworthy. Make an effort to find subjects that you're interested in or maybe unsure about, or maybe you need help with, and focus on those things and take your time and spend your time meditating on those things. And the most important thing is to let the Bible be your primary focus. Again, Christian meditation is focusing on something that's objective, something that's been given to you through the Scriptures by God. So read it thoughtfully every day. Really focus on the Scriptures. And again, this is a very personal thing. Say for me in the morning, that's where I choose to read in the morning, and I have the goal of reading it through once a year. But anything where you're reading the Scriptures on a regular daily basis, it can be just opening the Bible and picking a passage and just reading a few verses and thinking about it. Once you get that knowledge, think about what you just read and really meditate and see how it can apply in your lives. So you're going to learn the facts from looking at the Scriptures, and then you're going to see how it applies to you through the meditation aspect of this. And that's where really prayer comes into this as well. That's the best time to pray also. Ask God for strength, ask God for focus if you're having trouble focusing in on it. Ask for help in these things. And take that time where you're quiet and by yourself to study the Scriptures, meditate upon it, and pray as well. You go to Psalm 119. Go back to that passage. We'll look at verse 10. As you read, you might ask yourself things. You might say, is there some truth that I should know in this verse? How does this passage affect one of my previously held convictions or belief? That's a trap that you can fall into sometimes, is if you have a conviction or belief and you try to find Scriptures in the Bible to prove that. That's the incorrect way to study the Scriptures, is you should look at the Scriptures and see how that relates to your convictions and belief. And maybe that's the one thing you're going to meditate on. Is there a practice in your life you should change? Is there a habit that you should start to begin and do? You can think about these things while you meditate on the Scriptures. And then in Psalm 119, verse 10, you can tie in prayer with it. And this is an example of how you might end your meditation time. And this is what David said. So Psalm 119, verse 10. He said, I seek you with all my heart. Do not let me stray from your commands. Seek the Scriptures. Seek God with all your heart. And meditation is a part of that. Do that with the goal of not letting you stray from His commands, and pray for strength when you do this. Take that time to study and meditate, and then pray as well to ask for that strength. When you learn these things, and maybe you find something that's challenging, that you are going to have to change something in your life or start a new habit, and ask for that strength. Have prayer intertwined with your meditation time. So we can choose what to fill our minds with. Again, I know I've said this before, but it was something that my dad said about the accusation that some people say about the church, about Christians and Christianity. Is their accusation is you get brainwashed when you're a part of the church. And his response was, well, at least I'm choosing what to wash my brain with. Because really, in society, if you're, again, looking at social media and focusing on those negative things, the algorithm is recognizing that you're looking at those subjects, so it keeps feeding you more and more and more of those things. You can really get into that place where you're just focusing on that all of the time. You're getting brainwashed too. You're washing your brain with all of these negative things. So we as Christians can choose what to wash our brains with. We are what we think. We are what we really focus on. So make that transformation into a disciple of Christ by exercising this discipline of meditation, this time away from distractions to purposely and deliberately think about what God has taught you in the Scriptures. When we exercise regularly and do this practice of meditation, we are going to be better disciples of Christ. We're going to be stronger, and we're going to have a blessing because of it. We are going to be have more peace and joy because we're focusing on those positive, true, noble, and excellent, praiseworthy things. I'd like to offer an invitation. If you are not yet, have not yet accepted Jesus on as your Lord, we can show you in the Scriptures how to do that. He's offered that gift of salvation to everybody on the earth, no matter of your background or where you're from or anything like that. So we can show you in the scriptures how to accept that gift that he's offered to everybody. And if you're a Christian who's struggling in any way, we'd love to help you in any way that we can if you make your needs known.